On Christmas Eve 1971, a 17-year-old girl was sitting next to her mother on a one-hour flight over the Peruvian Amazon. Outside the window, a massive thunderstorm was building. The plane flew directly into it. Lightning struck the fuel tank. The right wing tore away from the fuselage. And in the chaos and noise and violence of a commercial aircraft disintegrating at altitude, Juliane Koepcke was sucked out of the plane, still strapped to her seat, and began falling through 2 miles of open sky above one of the most remote and deadly jungles on the surface of the Earth. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was her mother's voice saying, "That is the end. It is all over." Juliane Koepcke hit the jungle canopy still strapped to that seat and survived. And then, alone, injured, with no equipment, no map, and no idea where she was, she spent the next 11 days fighting her way out of the Amazon rainforest. This is one of the most extraordinary survival stories in the entire history of human endurance. And almost every part of it is hard to believe, until you understand the one remarkable reason she knew exactly what to do. Juliane Koepcke was born in Lima, Peru in 1954, the daughter of 2 German scientists, Hans Wilhelm Koepcke and Maria Koepcke, who had devoted their careers to studying the wildlife and ecosystems of the Peruvian Amazon. From a very young age, Juliane spent significant time at her parents' research station in the jungle. She learned how to move through dense rainforest. She learned which plants and animals were dangerous and which were not. She learned how rivers and waterways worked in the Amazon basin. She learned that if you followed a stream, the stream would lead to a river, and a river would eventually lead to people. She absorbed all of this as a child, naturally, the way children absorb the world around them. She had no idea she was preparing for anything. She was simply growing up. On December 24, 1971, Juliane and her mother Maria boarded Lanza Flight 508 in Lima. They were heading to Pucallpa, a city in eastern Peru, to spend Christmas with Juliane's father at the research station. The flight was supposed to take about an hour. 25 minutes after takeoff, the plane entered a severe thunderstorm. Passengers described extreme turbulence. Then, Juliane saw something that told her everything was about to end. A bright flash of light on the outer engine on the left wing. The plane had been struck by lightning. She heard her mother say those final words. And then, structural failure. The aircraft broke apart mid-air. Juliane found herself tumbling through the open sky, still buckled into her seat, still attached to a row of seats that had torn free from the fuselage. She was falling from approximately 10,000 feet, roughly 2 miles above the jungle canopy. She later recalled seeing the forest spinning beneath her as she rotated in freefall. She lost consciousness before impact. When she woke up, alone, on the jungle floor, it was already the next day, Christmas morning. She was surrounded by the sounds of the Amazon. Her mother was gone. All 91 other passengers and crew on board were dead. Juliane Koepcke was the sole survivor of Lanza Flight 508. Her injuries from the fall were significant but not fatal. She had a broken collarbone, deep lacerations on her arms and legs from the jungle vegetation. One eye was badly swollen. She had lost one of her shoes. She had a bag of sweets found near the wreckage of other passengers' belongings that would serve as her only food source for the days ahead. And she had one thing that would ultimately save her life, the knowledge her parents had given her growing up in the Amazon. Follow the water. A small stream leads to a larger stream. A larger stream leads to a river. A river leads to people. For 11 days, Juliane walked. She waded through water when the jungle was impassable on land. She swam sections of river. She slept on the banks when exhaustion took over. The Amazon rainforest is not a forgiving environment under any circumstances. It is home to caimans, anacondas, piranhas, parasitic insects, and diseases that can kill within days. Juliane dealt with all of it. On the fourth day of her trek, she came across 3 other passengers from the plane, still strapped to their seats, which had landed nose first into the ground. She checked for signs of life. There were none. She took the bag of sweets she found nearby and kept walking. The worst physical ordeal came from a cut on her arm that had become infested with fly larvae, a common and genuinely horrifying reality of the Amazon environment. Using fuel she found at a small shelter near the river, she cleaned the wound herself, removing the larvae one by one. She kept moving. On the 11th day, she heard the sound of a boat engine. She called out. 3 local loggers found her on the riverbank, emaciated, covered in wounds, barely recognizable as the teenager who had boarded a flight 10 days earlier. They took her to the nearest town. Medical teams were called. Her father arrived. She was alive. The search operation that had been launched after the crash, the largest in Peru's history at the time, had failed to find a single survivor in 11 days of searching. Aircraft flew over the dense jungle canopy and saw nothing. Rescue teams on the ground found wreckage but no living passengers. Meanwhile, Juliane Koepcke, a 17-year-old girl with a broken collarbone, no shoes, and a bag of sweets, had walked out of the Amazon on her own. In the years that followed, Juliane returned to Germany, completed a doctorate in mammalogy, and eventually returned to Peru, to the same Amazon rainforest that nearly killed her, to continue the wildlife research her mother had dedicated her life to before dying on that Christmas Eve flight. She built a research station near the area where she had survived. She named it after her mother. She has spent much of her adult life in the jungle that once tried to claim her life. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. Because the Amazon, for all its danger, was also the place her parents had given her the tools to survive. And she has never stopped being grateful for that. Juliane Koepcke fell 2 miles from a disintegrating aircraft, survived the impact, walked out of one of the world's most dangerous environments alone and injured over 11 days, and went on to dedicate her life to the place that should have killed her. There are survival stories. And then there is this one. We cover the most mind-blowing true stories from around the world every single week. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because you will not want to miss what is coming next. See you in the next one.